This episode is presented by the Visit Cedar City Brian Head Tourism Bureau. Discover the art of adventure at Utah's gateway to the parks. Cedar City is within a few hours' drive from 6 different national parks and monuments, and only 30 minutes from fresh snow at Brian Head Resort. Check out visitcedarcity.com to plan your next trip. This episode is sponsored by the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center, dedicated to supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs. It provides resources and services aimed at fostering business creation, growth, and retention. The center features the Makerspace, where entrepreneurs and small businesses can have access to 3D printers, video production, and photography equipment, t-shirt printing, and more. Whether you're starting a new venture or looking to expand an existing one, the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center offers the tools and guidance to help you succeed. To learn more and get involved, visit innovationcenter.cc. Welcome to Explore Local podcast presented by Visit Cedar City Brian Head and Cedar City Iron County Economic Development. This is produced by Dallas Smith Media, and I'm your host, David Johnson. And today we'd like to welcome Mac Urie with Iron Trailcraft. How's it going, Mac?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you here. So, Mac's with Iron Trailcraft. So, Mac, explain with what that is and what that means and how you got that name and kind of what you guys do, just high level.
You bet. So, Iron Trailcraft is a nonprofit. So, it's a 501c3. Yeah, it's a legitimate nonprofit. And it's just a bunch of guys here in town that love mountain biking. And we are in charge of all the mountain bike trails in Iron County, whether that's existing ones or new ones that we're getting built now or in the future. So our whole role is to basically work with the land managers in Iron County to build and maintain mountain bike trails. So that's why it's called Iron Trailcraft, is that Iron County and building trails are craft. So
nice, pretty simple, straightforward. Yeah. But those that aren't familiar, and I think a lot of people don't realize how these trails get made, right? They're just there for their convenience. And I've lived in areas on the side of the mountain where there were trails, but they were more, let's say, trails that were created by people just roaming over the years, or deer trails that slowly became a designated trail, or rough rock trails for ATVs and things. So tell a little bit about the difference between the different types of trails and why you're specifically honing in on mountain bike trails.
You bet. So there's all kinds of different trails, right? You have motorized trails, non-motorized trails, and within the non-motorized trails you can do horse, or you can do hike, or you can do bike. We're specifically focused on mountain bike trails. That's what we love. That's what we do. That's why we started.
So no other multi-use on the trails that you guys are building? No.
Yeah. There are definitely trails that are getting built, but Iron Trailcraft specifically is for mountain bike trails.
Gotcha.
There are some multi-use trails that we have built that obviously you can hike and trail run and utilize the mountain bike trails that we've been a part of, but they're specifically designed for mountain bike trails.
Gotcha.
We just basically focus on doing what the mountain bike trail is, and they're purpose built. Even the trails that we've had, 30 years ago, there's a place called Three Peaks. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Yep. Three Peaks. So it's a big rec site for a lot of the locals, plus people who come in. Those trails have been there for a long time, and they were just built by guys that wanted to build trails, out in the sticks and wanted to ride. And we're blessed to have that, lucky to have it. But the way that we build trails now is a lot different than the way that they were built back then. And even different soil types and different terrain, you have to build the trails. But we've partnered with IMBA, which is the Intermountain Mountain Biking Association. So we're kind of like underneath them.
Gotcha.
And so we're affiliated with them. And so all of our guys that are on the board and that we come out, we've all been through their training course. Oh, cool. And they have a manual that you can download right off their website that talks about how purpose-built trails are supposed to be designed and built. And for each technical level, it's black, you got black, double black, blue, and green.
Just like out on the ski slopes, right?
Exactly. And so different trails, depending on what the land manager wants to have there, what the popularity is of a trail, or if we want to do something, each trail designation has a different design and a different build technique.
Right.
And the main thing that's different than what trails were built previously was for maintenance and watershed. And so if you can build a trail properly, get the water off the trail, and build it in a way that you don't have to maintain it as much, then they last for a really long time before we ever have to go over and touch it. A lot of the mountain bike trails, especially downhill trails, they just go down a fall line, which means like as soon as you build the trail, that's where the water goes. And so then over the years, that just gets rutted out.
You see that in hiking trails too, where they keep rebuilding sections, but that's where the water's naturally flowing. And
exactly. And so really, and we can get into as much detail with this as you want, but it all comes from the design, the original layout, walking the site, making sure that you understand the terrain, where the best places for turns and water outs and things like that. And then you do a master plan, a master layout, and then you take each individual trail section at a time, and then you walk it and flag it. And we've been involved in some of the designs as well. Like we've built trail within Iron Trailcraft, not necessarily through IMBA or through, and we do it with different land managers, but we've had to do the same process. There was one trail that I designed and our group built, and I probably had 50 or 60 hours just in hiking. Oh, wow. Just in hiking the trail, the terrain from where we knew we wanted it to go from here to here. Yeah. But that was hours and hours and hours with a backpack, flagging. And just looking at routes, looking at drainage. Where's the best place to go? How is it going to work? Wow. And that's even before you get the design done. And then once you get it designed, then you have your other parties come and look at it and approve it, the land managers, and make sure it's going to work for them. Right. And then you go into build. So there's a lot of work that goes into a trail. Before you see the end, there's so much work that has gone into that beforehand, as far as like just boots on the ground, not even like looking at a map to see what would work there, but just boots on the ground. And then you also have to be cognizant of archaeology, making sure that we're not going through some of those areas. Like we've got a trail right now that's tied up with the BLM in one area of Iron County that we've been waiting 2 years for the archaeology clearance on it. Wow, that's crazy. And so, you know what's interesting to me about this, and I'm gonna take us back in the day a little bit, is when I started mountain biking. My first mountain bike was a Huff. No, it wasn't a Huffy. It was a Murray. Do you remember that? And I'm pretty sure we got it at Kmart. If somebody can verify that Murray was sold at Kmart back in the early 90s, I think like 92 or somewhere around there. And I always tease a lot of the young kids about mountain biking of, oh, you have these pretty boy groom trails. Back in my day, we had to go on just bouldering trails if we wanted to mountain bike down things, right? I don't know if that's how it was for you growing up, but and that was back when mountain bikes first had the little horns on the sides. I mean, I only got rid of that thing probably 15 years ago. I kept that first mountain bike because it was like a trophy to me that, I was one of the old school indestructible ones. Yeah, right. Yeah. And it was a Kmart mountain bike, which is kind of funny, which was still, even back then, was a cheapo bike. But, so did you grow up here in Cedar City, in Iron County? Raised, And tell me, how did you get into mountain biking back in the day, and how were the trails back then? Obviously, we're going to get into a lot about how they are now, and that's kind of what I want to get into, is how we progressed from where those trails were and kind of what we're seeing today. So tell me a little bit about when you were getting into mountain biking, how that happened. So growing up, we had like the BMX bikes, right? Like, I don't know if you remember the movie Rad? Oh, yeah. Like with the bikes. So that was like, I had the BMX bikes too, whether it was chromed out or the plastic wheel, the plastic star wheels. Yep. So we all had those growing up as a kid. We were building dirt jumps and just riding in the hills. So there was, it's called Razorback. So there's actually a trail system still. It's the east side of Cedar City and the foothills right there. Okay. And it's Cedar City property. And so there's a lot of trails there that are motorized and people hike them and ride bikes. But that's kind of what I grew up on, because I grew up on the east side of town as a kid. So we would just go push our bikes up to where we couldn't climb. You know, they didn't have gears. They didn't have any of that. And my dad was actually the public works manager at Bryan Head Town at one point. Yeah, I think he was in middle school. And he brought me home my first mountain bike. It was a Specialized rock hopper. He bought it from Georgia Ski Shop, I think, at the time. And so that had no suspension, but that was like top of the line back then.
Hey, I was going to say that's still a step up from my Kmart Murray.
It was a pretty sweet bike, but that was the first bike I ever had that had gears, right?
Yeah,
no suspension. It was fixed fork, fixed frame in the back. Yeah. So I rode that all over and just tried to utilize it the best I could. Three Peaks did have some trail there, and it was just more of a pedally, and riding over the rocks and things like that. And that was pretty fun. And then we would also go down to St. George because we had a lot of trails that we would ride down there in the wintertime. They've had a lot of those trails for a long time as well. So then moving forward, I got into, after I graduated high school, I got married. I got into endurance mountain bike racing. So we would do 24-hour events.
Oh, really?
Where we'd have a team, and then we'd traveled a couple different states.
About what years was this?
Oh, geez, it would have been I think I graduated college in 2008. So it would have been between 2008 and 2015, somewhere in that area. Did all that, competed in team events, went to Colorado, did some in Utah. And we still didn't have, basically we still had 3 Peaks and Razorback and then St. George. And then I got busy with kids, having little kids and work and starting businesses and things like that. So I kind of put that back on the back burner. But then I started getting into it as my kids got older again, still riding at 3 Peaks and riding down in St. George. And then we were notified about a meeting that the BLM was putting on about mountain bike trails, how they wanted to do it. And that's kind of where all of this came about. Was I showed up to this meeting, was at SUU, and the BLM rep was a recreation planner for the BLM. His name's Dave Jacobson. In our world, he's a legend.
Gotcha.
Because before him, there was nothing. And then as soon as he was hired to create recreation opportunities for the BLM in the Color Country District, that's when all this started happening. Okay. So basically, he laid out his whole plan of what he wanted to do. And he had already previously contacted Intermountain Mountain Biking Association. So I say IMBA for short, IMBA. They did a preliminary plan just based off of maps, looking at a contour line along. So the BLM stretches, we've got a lot of public land here, but the nice thing is it's so close to Cedar City. Basically, the city limits bump up right on the BLM line.
Gotcha.
And so from Basic Shirts Canyon, which is called Pyramid Ridge now, which is on the south end of town, all the way to Enoch, they had a master plan of over 100 miles of proposed mountain bike trail.
Wow, just for mountain biking, not trails in general.
Again, they're multi-use, but more specific, non-motorized and not horse trails, but or mountain bike design specific. And again, those are all utilized by hikers and trail runners and whatnot.
Right,
so,
yeah.
But anyway, he laid that all out, and he said, we need basically a chapter of guys here to help us facilitate this, because we can't do it all. And we're basically one entity. We need a group that we can partner with and create a relationship with, that we can work together on getting this accomplished. So there was probably 5 or 6 of us, maybe 4 or 5. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And we stayed after the meeting, and we just putting our heads together, and we're we want to do this. And there was a couple guys that had come up from St. George to the meeting as well. And St. George or Washington County already had a group that was set up, and it was called Dixie Mountain Bike Trails Association, DMBTA.
About what year was this going on?
Oh, I should have looked that up. I would say probably around almost 8 or 10 years ago.
Okay. All right. 2014.
Somewhere around in there. Yeah. Just as I was starting to get back into it. And really the whole reason why all of us got into it was we loved mountain biking. We're well, we have the ability to help create more trails here. That's more trails that we get to ride.
Yeah, exactly.
In town, as opposed to going somewhere else to ride.
Right.
So anyway, we partnered up with DMBTA because they were already set up as a 501c3. And so we kind of just worked with them, and then we were here, they were down there. They just kind of like, we were a sub chapter of them, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so then we would just started working with the BLM and taking down like what trail they wanted to do at that time. And so that's how we got started.
Wow. That's so cool to kind of see that progress. You know, what's funny too, is you had mentioned the BMX biking as almost a segue. And I hadn't even thought about that, but that really was my segue into mountain biking too. I mean, I remember I grew up in the military, so we moved a lot, but we were living up in Washington State, and there was a lot of home developments. And what us kids would go do is we would go build dirt jumps in the areas where it was like maybe a later phase that they weren't building on yet. And we'd build all these dirt jumps, jump our BMX bikes and everything. And then, yeah, kind of similarly, I got a mountain bike as a teenager, and it was my first gear bike. Like you said, no shocks, no nothing. The coolest part were the little horns that I was talking about earlier. And I think we got it because I was doing like a merit badge with Scouts.
Oh, there you go.
Like a mountain biking merit badge or something along those lines. But it's funny to kind of see how you kind of get into things and how they progress a lot. So you talked about how you started forming now, or at least at this time back in 2014-ish, we'll say, this organization. How did you, well, let's start with some of those beginning parts. How did you form your own 501c3? I mean, you don't have to get into all the boring parts, but what were some of the hurdles to kind of get that crack in to say, hey, we want to make this legitimate and be in association with these different entities?
But so once we formed with them, we just kind of started our own, we just started working with Dave Jacobson and the BLM, and he would take down basically a trail at a time. We want to work on this section. So we would organize build days, volunteer hours, things like that, where we would just go up and build by hand.
Was this just on Saturdays, on the weekends?
Saturdays was our big build days. And then we would do one night a week, in the summer. And the first trails that we did were up in Thunderbird Gardens.
Okay.
So it's called Red Hollow. There's a trail system up there. And that's kind of the first one that we started. And then the next trail system that we started was called the Iron Hills Network. Okay. It's out there on the south end of town. Trailhead's called Southview Trailhead, behind the hotels there, just south of the interchange. And we did a trail there called Lava Flow and Liking It. And that was the first time where we were kind of introduced to IMBA, where we actually had them come out and give us like a training session, work with us and help us understand the importance of purpose-built trails and why they do what they do and how they do it. And so we just kind of took it, trail at a time, training at a time. We worked with a lot of and they're so great because they have all the resources that like communities need to kind of create their own trailcraft or Iron Trailcraft like we have. And so they're always there to help. They have manuals online, they have everything. And we would do our own trainings, like as a group, we would just so that basically, I know the guys that were originally involved that aren't here anymore because they had to move away for work or whatever. I've been the one involved with the group from the very beginning. So I've kind of seen things come and go and people come and go. But we basically wanted to get up to the point and train so that the land managers would have trust in us to be able to do what we wanted to do.
Right.
But not necessarily what we wanted to do, but they didn't have to worry about if we were going to follow what their land manager rules.
Right.
So anyways, we worked that way a couple years. And then it was, I think during COVID, we kind of, obviously everything was different, but we still wanted to build, and Southern Utah was open basically. And we're like, why are we having to maintain all these stupid stuff that, everybody had to go through? Well, St. George was kind of telling us like, hey, you guys probably shouldn't be doing this, or maybe you need to think about this. And I told the board at the time, I was like, why don't we just create our own? Like, they don't know what we're doing. We don't know what they're doing really. Like, and if they want to impose, like if they want to run their build days or do what they want to do, let them do it. And it worked out great because at the same time, their president at the time was called one of the guys on our board and was like, "Hey, have you guys ever thought about like creating your own thing? Because like you guys are on your own doing good stuff. We're busy down here." And so it just was a perfect time.
So this came about during the COVID.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha.
So then we just basically talked to him and said, "What do we need to do to get set up on our own?" And they said, "You need to create your own 501c3." Mm-hmm. So we created an LLC. I've got friends in the industry, just had an attorney draft up the paperwork, and then our accountant filed for the 501c3 status. And then we're underneath IMBA. So it's kind of like they're the parent organization and we're an actual 501c3, but we're underneath them.
Yeah, chapter or something.
Exactly. And there's multiple chapters all over the United States. And you can choose to be underneath them or not. But we just felt like our relationship was so good and we were working so well together that it was just like a no-brainer to keep that.
And it gives a little validity to your organization. One question I had as you were talking about designing and building these trails is, you talked about a little bit about the archaeology. What about the engineering behind these? Are there like engineers through this parent organization, or how do you decide? Because I mean, if it's just some Joe Schmoes out there working, how do you know how to design this properly? It sounds like you went through some trainings, but I'm just kind of curious on the technical side of figuring out those trails.
So that's another reason why we partner with IMBA is they have a trail building arm called Trail Solutions.
Okay.
And so that's their job, right? They get paid to go all over the country, all over the world, really. Like IMBA's worldwide, they go all over.
Yeah.
And there's other like professional trail building companies that aren't associated with IMBA. And again, it just depends on the soil type, the geography, and what kind of trail you're wanting to build determines how you build it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, as far as engineering, like there's no structural loads or anything like that we have to worry about. Sometimes we've done bridges, but the land manager that we're working with, whether it's the BLM or the Forest Service, their in-house people design all that and do that. And then we just are kind of the labor that puts it in.
Oh, I see. Because if it were me out there helping build these trails, I'd be so worried about creating some sort of a berm, and the angle is just enough off so instead of curving around, people will go up all over the top.
Well, no, that's a good point because again, that goes back to the purpose built. Like if you're building something specific, then your berm should be so high depending on how fast you're going to be coming into that berm. And then the radius has to be a certain type of radius depending to set you up to what's coming next. So again, if it's just a blue trail, you build it per the standards for a blue trail, and then they all have different grades associated with that.
Right.
And whether it's a climbing trail and if you've got to have grade reversals for water flows. And so again, it all goes back to that basic training manual that IMBA's put out. And it's basically for purpose built trails. So you could download that, pick it up and read it, and you would have the knowledge that you would need to come out and basically work with us. And then in the field, you get a feel. And if you mountain bike, like things make sense when you're building. And so you don't want to hire somebody to build a trail that's never mountain biked. Right? Like if you hire a horse trail company to come and build you're not going to get what you want. So everybody's a biker. So you get the idea of, and if you're a volunteer and you come out and help us build, we kind of go over everything with you and the volunteers and say, hey, let's do this or do this. And we kind of manage the volunteers are out there. If we have a big group, then we're kind of there. We do it like a safety training before and then tell them what to do and how to do it. And then we just kind of work with them. And the guys that have come out a lot, like once you get the hang of it, you kind of know what we're doing. And then sometimes we have to go back and, we couldn't do it without volunteers. Sure. But there are some things that we have to kind of come back and tune up or tweak a little bit and finesse it a little bit better. Yeah, for sure.
Talking a little bit about this gives me a little PTSD, and probably that's not a fair analogy, but so I don't know, probably 10 years ago, I was living up north and I was trying to get a little bit more back into mountain biking. So I started following and joining all these mountain biking groups. Mm-hmm. And, I still, my third bike was Specialized. I think it was a rock hopper. Mm-hmm. Probably was a rock hopper. But it only had the front shocks, didn't have full suspension. I'm still riding like a what used to be the standard, like a 24-inch wheel, and I didn't even upgrade that till just a couple years ago. And I was riding on this, and on these social media groups, there was a lot of what I would term divas about the trails, and about bikes, and they would go off. If you didn't have a $3,000+ mountain bike, you shouldn't be riding on these trails, or we just, if you shouldn't be going off these jumps because you ruined the lip. And all I could think of was back in the day of the early 90s mountain biking. I'm like, I would joke, I'd be like, they're crying about their perfectly little groomed trails. I had to go off the lip of whatever random rock was in front of me. You know what I mean? And I understood what they were getting at, because a lot of work, a lot of effort goes into that. But I actually got out of all those mountain biking groups because it bugged me, because mountain biking, from what I used to know of kind of almost this grassroots kind of group of getting out there, all of a sudden became these well-to-do, and like I said, jokingly, kind of diva-ish sort of about the trails, about the type of bike you use. And for me, growing up as kind of not in a very wealthy home, mountain biking was one of those things that I could do where I didn't have to have a ton of money. I could buy a bike from Kmart and get out there and hit it. I remember reading an article several years ago about a guy similar to me, just riding some, cheap mountain bike and won this major race. And everybody's like, who is this guy? Right. I love those kind of opportunities. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up, I'm kind of digressing in a different angle about the mountain biking industry, and to talk to me a little bit about that, about the accessibility of mountain biking in general and in Iron County. And, if people are feeling intimidated, or maybe they're uneducated about, like you're talking about, different levels of trails. And that's really what I saw on the social media, is these people would get all angry about the trails rather than educating those who are maybe didn't know. They're just trying to get out there and try it for the first time, or get back into it like I was. So talk to me a little bit, or I should say, talk to our audience a little bit about that, about understanding those distinctions between the different kind of trails. And if you're getting back into it, or if you're wanting to start for the first time, like, let's start off with maybe talking for those individuals about the trails. And then maybe you can give some pointers about like equipment, bikes, and,
you bet.
because you see a lot of people buy these super expensive bikes. Matter of fact, that's actually a lot of times I watch KSL and I'm like, I hope someone thought they were going to get into it, bought an expensive mountain bike, going to sell it for half off.
And they don't use it as much as they thought they were. Yeah,
exactly. For sure. But yeah, talk to about the trails, like educate people about, if they're getting out there, what should you be trying to do, and how do you get started? And maybe people don't know these color differences and what they mean, and
you bet.
Everything. Yeah.
I'll just say that, like, mountain biking is for everybody. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. Like, that's honestly one of the best things about it, is because you can just get a bike. It doesn't matter if you pick it up from Walmart or you pay $10,000 for the best bike on the market. Like, and it's public land, right? It's all of our land.
That's one of the things I love about mountain biking.
We all have the ability to go out and enjoy. And that's one of the things that I think I appreciate a lot about it, is that we're able to go and provide that opportunity to other people, and to help them get outside, and to be able to experience the public lands and the beauty that surrounds us in being able to ride a bike. So that's basically my opening step. All that's garbage. I mean, you Strava is, everyone's always trying to kill a Strava. And again, it's just, they're there for everybody. Right. And that's kind of what the trail designations help with, because if you're starting out, you're not going to want to go on a black trail. Mm-hmm. You're going to want to start on blue and green, right? And work your way up. And those are purpose built so that a beginner can come on and ride it and have an enjoyable time.
And blue's easy for those who don't know. Mm-hmm. Green's the intermediate, and then black.
Yep. And then you have double black on top of that. And each area might have that's the BLM standard, right?
Okay.
And each state and area and like resort might have a different, but basically it's the same thing. If you're familiar with skiing, it's basically the same thing. And you do have a lot of people like, oh, this isn't a black trail, it's got to be this or that. Everybody has different opinions on what constitutes a black trail.
Well, yeah, some of like my wife, she loves going and mountain biking, but the downhill still intimidates her. So if we're on a blue trail and there's like a little 1 foot drop to her, that's still intimidating, even if it's on a blue, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, there is the different gauges.
Well, and with the BLM, like you can't build the same stuff you'd be able to build at like Bryan Head or Deer Valley or Park City, because every jump or anything like that has to be able to be rollable. Right. Yeah. Like, so if the consequences of failure aren't as high, right? So again, it's all purpose built, and without going into all the boring details of what and why, but I would just say start and go get something, get on a trail, obviously wear your helmet, and just get out there and start pedaling, and start on one of the easier trails. And that's another cool thing too, is that we've worked with IMBA, and they did for even the little kids to do a pump track out there at Southview Trail. It's kind of like a little training ground. So you can do the loop, you can go on platforms, you can do berms, you can do things without like having to go on a trail. And
I was going to actually ask you that to make some recommendations. So you've got the little pump track at Southview Trail. So for a beginner, you can just go roll up and down those, right? You get a sense of leaning back when you're supposed to lean back, and how you stand up or shift your gears if you're just getting into it, right? So for some of those beginners or people new to the area, what would you say are some of the good trails here in Iron County to go maybe hit?
So it depends on what type of riding you like. Like Three Peaks is more of just kind of like a flat pedal, get a workout in. There's definitely some trails there that are a little bit more flowy when you get higher and more technical on slick rock. But you have all levels out there. I don't think there's a double black. I don't even think there's a black trail out there. And
Three Peaks out west for those
the
that
Three
don't
Peaks
know.
Recreation Area. There's about 30 miles of trail that you can mountain bike there. And then another one, a good starter would be a 13th hole. That's out of Thunderbird Gardens area, right by the golf course. And then Southview.
13th hole.
Yeah. That's why we named it. It's on the 13th hole. So, and then Southview Trailhead. And there's a bunch of, and going back to working with them, but Cedar City is kind of like really special to them because they've been able to do things here that they've never done anywhere else as basically kind of like a proving grounds.
And why is that? Just because of your group or?
Well, I think kind of a culmination of things. It's just timing, right? The way that the industry was moving, more and more people are getting into mountain biking. And so you want to be out there with your family, right? And other people. And again, you got to start somewhere. So Lava Flow and Liking It is a really popular trail. And that was the first time that IMBA had done basically built one trail, but you had green, blue, and black options on that same trail with just different lines.
Oh, okay.
So basically what that means is I can go down and take my kids with me, and we all get to have our own level of experience for what our skill set is on one trail. And it's just the different options that you have. You can go up over this option and to the left and get a black experience, or you just go past it and you get your normal blue experience. You don't have to hit any of them. You can roll everything's safe. And then it also gives you an opportunity to progress in your skill set by riding just the same trail. And that's kind of the first time that that's ever been done, at least through IMBA, is to build a trail that you could basically take a whole group could go, and you have different skill sets, and everybody has an amazing experience on that one trail. And so that's a good example of what they've done that, and they've taken that to different communities all across the country, and they've had huge success with it.
So with these trails, I've been on lots of mountain bike trails in other areas where you see a local trail group and they just create names of the trails, and they create little signs by just printing on paper and laminating it and stapling it to a wood stake that they buy at Home Depot. What are you guys doing to help people know the distinctions? Do you have funding that comes in, whether through this other organization or the state or grants, or how are you kind of helping educate people when they get out on these trails?
You bet. So again, everything that we do is on public land. So depending on the land manager, whether that's Forest Service or BLM or even the city property, everybody kind of has their own how they want things signed.
All right.
And so the trail names, to talk about that's just kind of, sometimes the BLM will do like a survey. We'll have this, we have X number of options, and then we put that out there, and then people get a vote on it sometimes, or put their input in through a box,
Gotcha.
or sometimes they just say, this is the name of the trail, or they talk to us. So trail naming is pretty simple. And then as far as signage, again, all the trails are signed, what they should be, in accordance to the BLM's signing requirements, right? Like, again, we're working with that land manager and that entity. So we're just partnering with them to help build the trail on there and to make sure that it meets their requirements. And kind of talking about where we started to where we are now, like we started out just basically like boots on the ground with picks and shovels, and like just go out there and work your guts out and build a trail, you know what I mean? Put hours in. But we learn really, really quickly is that, like, if we're going to get to a point where we can actually get to where we were now and help the BLM build out their plan, because our role is more now, we've partnered with the BLM and the Forest Service in writing grants to the state. So we've been awarded quite a bit of money from Utah Outdoor Rec. And so there's different grant cycles for different trails, and we just sit down with them and say, okay, which trails do you want to do? Which money do we have where? What money can we use for match? And then we basically, before the grants due, we already have a plan in place of which trail we're going to put money, or we're going to apply money for. And then if that's awarded, then we just basically take that and use it and build a trail. And then typically we've been hiring most of the trail work that we've done in Cedar City since we've started doing this is machine built. Some of it has been hand built, but majority of it, because of the terrain and the way that they're designed.
Getting like a mini.
Yeah, they have trail dozers and a mini X that go up there and cut it in, and then what our group is kind of responsible for and how we basically match funds is that the BLM gives you a certain dollar amount per hour for a laborer.
Oh, really?
Yep. And so that's how, and most state agencies or other agencies, that's the same with the grant. So for every person you have out there for however many hours, there's a dollar amount that's allocated per hour for that volunteer.
Awesome. I didn't realize that.
So like each grant cycle is a little bit different depending on how much money we get, but we have to execute a certain number of hundreds of hours, right?
I was going to ask, how do they temper somebody going in and putting dozens of hours?
Yeah. So like if we got to match 10 grand or 25 grand or whatever, we just know that, like, okay, we've got to get 300 hours on this trail for volunteer work. And so we just basically, like, we have to, and to do that, you have to sign in, like we have a sign in sheet, we have to log our hours. Everybody has to, it has to be done appropriately, right? Or we can't just say, oh yeah, we logged 100 hours or 300 hours. Everything's done in the exact way that it's supposed to do to be able to submit for the grant process and to basically prove it. And so that's really what our role and what I see our role as Iron Trailcraft is working with land managers, securing grants, and hiring out the trail building process. And then we're basically the match grant. Like, we come up and try to get the funds to match whatever grant we need, and whether that's through volunteer hours or through fundraisers or whatever, that's kind of where we see our best effort put. Okay. I mean, we're obviously out there, doing it and working with the volunteers, but like, if we tried to build every trail that we needed to build, there's just no way. I mean, our board, everybody that's involved in Iron Trailcraft it's all volunteer. Yeah. So there's a couple guys that are retired, but mainly everybody else that works on it, and all the volunteers that come out, most of them have full-time jobs. They have families, they have other stuff that they're doing. And so, if it was up to us just to build them, it wouldn't get done very quick.
So how many people are on your board?
There's 8 of us.
8 of you? Okay. And you're the president of Iron Trailcraft. Are you also the board chair, or is that separate? Or?
Yeah. I mean, we're pretty informal. Like, obviously we had to have certain titles to to satisfy the requirements for the organization, but we basically just do what needs to be done. Like, we have a guy that's our secretary, and he, in his past career, he worked a lot writing grants with the city that he worked for. And so he's kind of like our grant writing specialist. Nice. And then I also serve on the active transportation committee for Cedar City. Oh, okay. And so that's kind of my unique skill, is that I'm connected with the town and what's going on. And our goal with that is to make sure that our paved trail system in Cedar City links up with all of our trailheads. Oh, I love that. So that you basically can ride your bike from home and not have to put it in a pickup or on the back of your vehicle and get to the trail. So each one of us plays a different role. Like we have a guy that works at SU Outdoors that has a tie-in with the university there. So we're just we all have our own careers, but we all kind of have a special skill set.
Something that you offer.
Yep. And we've got somebody that runs that takes care of all the build days. Like he's kind of the guy that's over all the scheduling and manages the volunteers that come out and build. So,
well, as you're describing that, it just made me think of like Ocean's 11 or something. You get each guy with this unique set of skills to make this operation happen. Right?
Yeah. But ultimately, we're just all doing whatever needs to be done to make it work, right? Like in the end, the goal is to get more mountain bike trail on the ground.
Yeah.
And so whatever we have to do to get it done. And again, sometimes we don't get as much done as we'd hoped or we'd like, just because everybody's busy and we weren't able to, spend as much time. But when we do get a grant, like, we have to satisfy those grant requirements. So we're working every week to get people out to help and to be able to log those hours and to complete the trail.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna kind of circle back a little bit what we were talking about, and then I want to get into it kind of toward the end. I really want to hone into what are the great trails here, and what advice for those looking to come to the area, or for the hardcore mountain bikers, that sort of thing. But I'm going to go back again to this topic of kind of like a beginner. There's so many mountain bike options now. You've got your 27.5 wheels, you got your 29-inch wheels, which to me, when I went from my 24 to 29, I wasn't even sure I wanted to go to 29 because
you're probably on a 26 at that
point. Or 26,
yeah,
sorry,
then,
not 24. Yeah, 26, you're right. That's what my specialized was. My Murray, I think, was a 24 back then, but 26. But even from a 26 to 29, that was like intimidating. I'm like, but everybody told me it's like, you just roll over everything. But what I was worried about is, because I'm a small guy, was just getting enough lift when I needed it and all those things, and just maneuverability. So tell me, someone maybe has been out of mountain biking or trying to get into it, and they're looking to buy a mountain bike. They want something decent. What are some of the key things in a mountain bike that they should be looking for? I mean, there's everything from dropper post to, the little button that locks your suspension and all of that. What are some of the basics that you need to just get rolling if you're not sure if you want to start off hardcore?
You bet. So I'll just say this, like, even for myself, I will probably never be as good a rider as my bike that I have would allow me to be.
Gotcha.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like everyone they geek out about all this different stuff but like really the only people that will max that out and utilize a bike to its fullest potential is if you're a professional.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're not professional, but like that's your number one hobby and passion and you're competing all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's so many little things that like you can geek out on and dictate. And I'm like, this is like for the average person, like none of that matters, because the average person is never going to be able to ride enough to be able to fully utilize everything that a high-end bike would have to offer.
Right.
Or to be able to, like, most people aren't even like fit enough to be able to like push themselves to the point where having all those extra things on your bike, whether it's your hub or your chain or your sprocket, you know what I mean? Like, and so don't get caught up in all that stuff. There's so many options. There's so much technology. The mountain bike world has come so far.
Right.
And we have some amazing bike shops in town, and they're very knowledgeable, and all of them here are fantastic. We work with all of them. I would just recommend going in and have a conversation with them and just have them walk through, like, and it kind of depends on what type of riding you want to do, right? Like if you just want to get out and pedal for an exercise, then you don't need maybe a full suspension mountain bike. If you want to like do everything, there's other bikes that will fit that. And if you want to do downhill only and just ride bike park like at Bryan Head, there's bikes that are specific for that, and they'll educate you on that. And then also it's come out to some of our build days and rub shoulders with the guys that do it all the time, and you meet people that are in it, and you can get information from them. Or if you have a friend that mountain bikes, just start somewhere, right? But don't get so worried about every little option and everything that a bike can do for you, because again, if you're just starting out, like all you need is a bike. And then as you ride that bike and you start to understand like what its capabilities are, and more importantly, like what your skill set and what your capabilities are, that's really going to dictate like the trails that you ride and the direction that you want to go. Right. So just start somewhere, and there's different options on KSL and different bike forums that you can read up on.
Right.
But I see people get lost in the weeds.
Yeah, I do too.
On that. And it's almost mind numbing because I competed, and I remember one race, it was a Jameis Dakar. I bought it from my brother-in-law for $300. He's actually the one that kind of got me back into mountain bike racing. And me and my brother, we did a 24-hour event down it was called the 25 Hours of Frog Hollow at Sound and Virgin. And we did that race as a co-ed team, and we took second. And we shared that bike. It was a 26-inch frame, full suspension. But my brother and I shared that bike. And so you're riding, nonstop. We had some of the highest end bikes, in our pit, basically on our team. There was 2 teams sharing a pit, 2 co-ed teams. You camp overnight, but there was bikes breaking down left and right. Like they were having to fix them. We were working on them, and they were probably $5,000-$6,000 bikes. And we're riding this. There was no issues whatsoever. The whole time I paid $300 or $400 for this bike, and we placed. You know what I'm saying?
That's
and so
awesome.
Your fitness and your skill set is really going to be a big factor in what you're doing. And then also, like, obviously what you can afford, right?
Yeah.
Like, and how much are you going to use the bike? Like, I love it. And when I ride, I like to ride hard, but like what I spent on my bike, I probably didn't need to spend on my bike because I don't ride it enough to justify what I paid. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, and so really everybody's like, I'm not saying that don't spend money on a bike if you want to spend it, but for someone who's just starting out, you don't need to worry about or be stressed out about like getting the best bike or getting this. Like, just start, get your skill set up, get your fitness up, and then figure out kind of what riding you like to do, and then just kind of go that way. Talk to the people in the bike shop. They're very knowledgeable. Come out and associate with us on the trail, get an idea of what you're looking at, and that'll point you in the right direction.
Well, I remember my second mountain bike. I rode that thing so hard. It was a hard tell. I only recently, a couple of years ago, bought my first full suspension. And that's because back when full suspensions first came out, there was a lot of stuff about you lose a lot of the torque when you're trying to go uphill. You do a lot of slipping. And so, and a lot of people just stuck with the hardtails, and that I was one of them. And I never had actually tried a full suspension because I was leery of slipping out trying to go uphill. And anyways, and so, but this second bike, it on the very last little Slick Rock ride in Moab, the Slick Rock Trail, there's that rock where you come into the parking lot, and that bike I'd had, I don't know, 6 years or so, and I'd ridden it so hard, and riding into the parking lot, it literally was like a movie where an old jalopy car just like breaks down when they finally get to their destination. I'm going down that hill, and the back derailleur ate itself, and then the spokes on both my tires all at the same time poked through the rim and the inner tube and everything. That bike just like collapsed on itself as I was riding into the parking lot. And so, and I was either engaged or going to get married or just recently married or something. So my third mountain bike, this is what that long story was about. I just think it's comical how that bike just totally just gave. Means
you rode it well.
Yeah, it gave up the ghost on me on that last hill there into the parking lot from Slick Rock. But I was looking for another mountain bike for myself, and this was a few years later, or a couple years later probably. And I wanted to get my wife one too, and to get her into it. And similarly to what you're saying, you bought that bike for $300. I scoured KSL, and I was able to find 2 mountain bikes and this was at least, it may have been even longer ago, about 15 years ago. And I got them both for $500, both these bikes, that Specialized I was telling you about. And then I got my wife a Rally. And somebody had fixed up a couple mountain bikes. The one I got was newer. My wife's was a little more fixed up or whatever. But they were great, and they've been great for years. And especially for me, kind of, I'd had a few years where I hadn't been riding. I'm like, oh, I want to get back into it, but I didn't have a lot of money, being, newly married. And that bike lasted me until just a couple of years ago. And now my kids are riding it, and until maybe they can see if they're comfortable enough to ride. This next bike that I got, it is a full suspension. It's a Scott. and I just got it on a sale because I'm like, all right, I'm going to try this full suspension. And I cannot tell you the world of difference, especially drop offs. And it has a dropper post. And for those who don't know, dropper post, probably only mountain bikers are even listening to this anyways, but it lowers that seat so you can lean way back and not end over the front of your handlebars. And I've done that more times than I can count. But there is something nice once you start getting used to riding bikes. And I bought mine. I think I bought mine. I almost feel embarrassed to say this, but I shouldn't, because I don't spend a ton of money. Yeah. I get what I need. And I think we got it for like a couple thousand, which to me was like, oh my goodness, right. I can't believe I'm spending this much money on a mountain bike. But then you go out there and all these guys are in these $5,000 mountain bikes and you almost feel like shamed. Like I didn't spend enough on my bike, but yet out of my personal pocket, I'm like, I spent way too much on this thing. And so there is a balance, you know, and I have found that, like, you know, I don't use the lockout on the front suspension really that much, or even the rear suspension or whatever. But the dropper post was the one thing that I found made a world of difference. We got my wife a newer bike a little bit ago. She still wanted the hardtail. She wasn't sure how she felt about full suspension. But teaching her how to use the dropper post and, you know, how to go off a little drop off and things like that. And I mean, she'll kill me on the uphills, but the downhills, it's no contest, right? And part of that is the intimidation factor and just building up the confidences. And we went out to Three Peaks, and this is actually where I want to start going next. We went out to Three Peaks, and we were riding around, and just as you described, it was just, I mean, there was a little more, it wasn't like hard challenging, but it was enough challenge to build somebody's confidence and build her confidence. She's like, oh my goodness. And on a more groomed trail. Cause a lot of the riding that we had done weren't on these groomed trails. And I think it's because we were intimidated to go with all these hardcore mountain bikers that are like, get out of the way, you know, or whatever. And, you know, and there's some rules to the trails. And let me clarify that actually. Tell the rule about uphill, downhill when it's a two-way trail. What is the rule on that? Who's supposed to yield?
You're supposed to yield to uphill. But the biggest thing is you shouldn't, I mean, not
the downhill yields to the uphill, right?
But we don't have a ton of bi-directional of the new stuff that we've done.
You're doing a lot of one-way direction.
Yeah, it just makes things so much better, and especially when you're coming down fast. I mean, there are some trails that are bi-directional, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you just have to be cognizant about that. And
but a lot of people always forget which way it is. Am I supposed to yield because they're buzzing down? But you yield to the uphill because they're working their butt off getting up that hill, right? And it's once you lose the momentum on the uphill, then you got to get off and walk
that's called trail etiquette, right? Yeah. And there's all kinds of nuances about trail etiquette, but like that's just kind of knowing before you go, right? Yeah. Like just kind of getting a few things under your belt and making sure that you're riding where you're comfortable, so that you're not going to be pedaling up a trail that some guys are bombing down. You know, you don't want to necessarily be doing that. But yeah, we run into people on the trail, and you just try to communicate and do the best you can. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of different stuff that goes into trail etiquette, and you can read on forums and all that. But basically, for someone who's again getting into it, like, don't worry about any of that. Just get a bike that fits your budget and get out and ride. And just get out and enjoy it and just be outside. And it's a different experience because you can have fun on a bike, but you're pedaling, you can smell things, you can see things, you can hear things, you see wildlife. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing to be out there with your friends. If you choose to do it that way, you can listen to music if you want. I don't tend to do it as often just so I can hear.
You can be alert.
I can hear if I do, it's only one ear at a time. Mm-hmm. But just get out there and ride. And I'm going to put a plug in for a great group here in town. It's called Cedar City Bike Works. I'm not sure if they're a full-on nonprofit, but it's ran by a guy named Matt Bullis, and they're associated with the Slow Roll in Cedar City. Yeah. So they basically take donated bikes and fix them up and then sell them or give them back to the public for people who can't afford.
Oh, that's great.
So I've personally donated a number of bikes there, and other people do as well. And then also they have shop hours basically where you can come in and learn how to work. They'll teach you how to work on your bike. As kind of just like it's a service to help people who aren't in the industry or don't have a lot of money.
Well, and especially young kids that maybe aren't sure. And
so it's a massive benefit for the town. So
cool.
Look them up if you
Body
don't know where
Works,
to,
like with
Cedar City Bike Works.
Bike Works.
Yep.
Sorry, I said Body Works. Bike Works with an X or a KS?
I think it's just Works, WOR.
Okay. Didn't know if there was some hipster kind of spelling to make it cool.
No, but they're right down there off of 800 West and Industrial Road right there.
Yeah.
And anyways, a great, again, I'm not sure if they're 100% like a 501c3, but it's basically, they just exist to help people like get into biking.
Well, and I think that's great because there's a lot of, we have mountain bike teams here locally, and some of the kids, you know, there's a couple kids I know that are using their parents' bike, trying to see, you know, do I like it? Am I good at it?
Yep.
You know, are they intimidated by it? It's a great way to connect with organizations like that. And I think what you were saying too, even with the Iron Trailcraft too, to connect, to kind of see and learn from other people that are into it, you know, you're kind of getting these mentors. And so like, if you have a kid that's maybe interested in mountain biking, having them participate with Bike Works or Iron Trailcraft is going to help kind of see, is that something that they really want to do and get passionate about? So,
well, and if you're thinking about the high school team, that's what they say. Just, they don't cut anybody. Just come out and ride. Like, grab a bike that you have and get out there and give it a shot, you know, and see if it's what you like. And if it does, then you can carry on and continue to go down that road and improve your skill set, improve your fitness, and then get into a newer bike that is going to allow you to grow above and beyond what that other bike was able to do.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, with some of the time we have remaining, we've been going, actually, it's been going great. I want to ask a few questions about that maybe where people can learn about our trails. So first of all, do you know how many miles of mountain bike trails we have here in Iron County?
Oh, geez. Currently, I should have looked that up. I know we have around 30 out at Three Peaks. We've got 30 something miles in the Iron Hills system, which is Southview Trailhead down to Pyramid Ridge. And we're just finishing up another 3-mile trail. That's our last trail that'll be open in the spring.
Cool.
And then we have, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 miles in Thunderbird Gardens. So I would say, like, all in Iron County, well, you've got Blowhard as well. I don't know, maybe like 70. That's a guess. That's probably wrong, but that's my guess.
Well, now, when you build these trails, or even just any of the existing trails in Iron County, you're doing signage out there. But are you putting these routes on any apps like the Mountain Bike Project or All Trails? Do you guys
Trail
is that part of your process?
Yep. Yeah. So as soon as the trail's done, one of our guys will ride it and then upload it. Is Trail Forks your recommended one? Yeah. So there's Trail Forks and Mountain Bike Project, and I can't remember. I personally use Trail Forks. That's just the one that I use. And then once they're new, then they're shown, and it shows the, you know, if you've ever looked at it, it shows like the grade and the mileage and then what the classification is.
Does it show the direction that you should ride that route? Yep. Sometimes that's the confusion.
Yep.
I know when I and others have gone to newer areas, we're like, which way is this supposed to be?
Yep. And they're signed too, correctly at the trailhead where you start. You know, they're signed the way that it needs to be. And a lot of that is just basically like what we've been able to do with the BLM. Like, when we build them, it's kind of like, well, this is going to be a multi-direction. And then when we do it, like, we should probably just make this at one direction only and interconnected. And so that's the nice thing about the Iron Hills Trail System, is there's so many different connections that you can do. Cool. You can ride out and back on a trail. You can do a loop. You can do an offshoot on that. I mean, you could spend all day there if you want, just doing different options and different loops. Yeah.
What would you say, as somebody that's been a part of this and been mountain biking here locally, you know, since you were a kid, what would you say are some of your personal favorite trails?
So the sea trail is fun. Where you get dropped off at the sea, and it's an 8-mile flow trail. You connect different trails. You start on the sea trail, and then you get to Green Hollow, and then you come and you dump out on Liking It, and then you go down Lava Flow. That's 8 miles of just different, you know, you got steep stuff off the sea, and then you've got some pedally sections, some flowy section, and then you can also go on to Boulder Dash, which is a black trail. It's where they've built I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's through the lava field, and they've basically made a path through the middle of a lava field. It's really chunky and really gnarly.
Wait, is that by Navajo Lake?
No, it's right here in town.
Oh, it's here in town.
Yeah, it's called Boulder Dash. It's off of Green Hollow.
Okay,
it's a double black or a black option. And there's no jumps or gaps on that, but you're exposed on the hillside and it's all black rock and it's pretty gnarly. Like that was one that our group built by hand.
Wow.
So that's a fun one. Lava flow and liking it. Boneyard is a blast. You ride up, elevate, go down Boneyard. The trail that we're building now, or that Trail Solution is finishing up, that's going to be a blast too.
Cool.
It's going to be a 3-mile flow trail down to the Pyramid Ridge Trailhead. It's called now. It used to be Shirts Canyon, but they've called it's Pyramid Ridge now. So
gotcha. Well, now we've talked about Three Peaks a couple times, and one thing I don't want to forget to mention isn't that where the state high school mountain biking championships are held, or they did one year?
Yeah, so it's kind of cool because they'll move it around to different towns and different cities, and so they've had one there I think a couple times, and I'm sure they'll continue to have them there as well.
That's cool. And what as far as when you're out on the trails, and this is the next part that I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about. People coming from out of the area, whether it's in state coming down here or tourists from other states, how much of that are you seeing between locals and non-locals coming to the area, and what kind of impacts do you think that has, not just on our trails, but maybe on our economy, and what benefits or cons, I guess, do you see in some of this? Because I think as I've seen Cedar City over recent years, and you even mentioned, starting the 501c3 during COVID, I feel like there's been a cool upward tick of mountain biking in the area.
For sure. And the growth of the sport and the growth of the high school mountain bike teams. I mean, there used to be, it was the Flying Monkeys. When we first started that with the MBTA, when we originally, Flying Monkeys was the team for basically Washington County.
Oh, gotcha.
And Cedar City didn't even have a team. And so you've just seen how many kids have joined the NICA, races and the high school teams. That's been incredible. And I mean, Red Rock Bicycle opened up a shop here in town, and we've just seen this massive, basically influx of people that wanting to ride bikes, and because they have the ability to ride them here. And that's IMBA's kind of main thing with their mission is they have a mantra called more trails close to home. And so we're not driving an hour or two away from town to ride quality mountain bike trails. Our trails are right here. I mean, if you think about it, you have the Cedar City limits and then the BLM, and we've got 1, 2, 3, we'll have a 4th. So we have 3 current trailheads that are right at the city limits where you can basically ride to, if you want, out of your house, take the paved trail system to, or drive, depending on how far away it is. But so that's very unique, and that's been a huge benefit for the locals. We've seen trail runners, hikers, walkers. We've seen young kids out. We've seen people in their 80s out. Like it's amazing to see how many people get out and utilize it. And we've seen people from all over the country, even all over the world. We bump into people that are from out of state, out of like South America, Europe. If they're already in the area and they're planning on doing some mountain biking, they're like, oh, we've got these trails right here.
Right.
And again, they're purpose built, they're fun, they're flowy. You're not going to get like, super hurt on them. You don't have to go. It's not like a bike park. So I can take my kids with me on one trail, and I can do all the hard technical stuff on that same trail. My kids can go by it. We can get down the trail, and we've all had a great experience.
Right.
And so that's been a huge benefit. And with the races that you see coming to town, that brings all the parents and the kids in. So that benefits the restaurants, that benefits the gas stations, it benefits everybody. And when people are coming to stay to mountain bike here, whether that's to hit here and Bryan Head and Blowhard and Navajo Lake and all the surrounding trails that we have, I mean, definitely the businesses are seeing it. And I think, I know for a fact the BLM has trail counters on each trail, and so they know exactly how many people are utilizing the trails every year.
Gotcha.
And so they keep track of it. And that's some of the information that we use to apply for grants, is that like, hey, we need to have this grant to do it. And with that, it's just like anything else, is that the more we use something, the more maintenance is going to be required.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's why we build the trails that we build and spend the money the way that we do, is so that they are built to last. And they're built so that they don't require a ton of maintenance, year after year after year. They can be ridden for years before anybody has to go up and tune anything up. And then when you do maintain them, it's very minor. We're not having to go back and rebuild a whole section because of a washout or something like that. And so the plan is to basically continue to build this out, and we'll help the BLM facilitate that and help the city, because we do have some trails that are on the city property. And we'll be the group that basically is over all of them.
Gotcha.
And we work with the people that need to maintain it. We go out and maintain it, or we hire it out. And we just want to be able to produce more trail for everybody that wants to ride. That's our whole mission.
That's a perfect segue. So about how many people do you typically, I mean, I'm sure it fluctuates when you're out building trails, about how many volunteers, because this is volunteer driven, about how many volunteers you usually have out there?
Depends on the day. So sometimes we'll have 1 or 2, sometimes we have 10.
Gotcha.
You know, and the trails that we have that are closer to town and don't take a way seat up, that the more we have, because it's a lot easier to get to.
Yeah.
And we know that. We know when we've talked about that, like, hey, this trail, we may not be able to get as many people out as we have on previous trails because we're further away, we're higher up. So we usually meet at the trailhead. We call it a ride, build, ride. So every Thursday night we have a ride, build, ride, and you show up at the trailhead, sign in, and then you pedal up to where we're working. So you basically get a ride, and then you do a build or a maintenance project, and then a lot of the guys will go for a ride after that.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's kind of like it gets people out to get a ride in, but also gets volunteer hours. And so as the light gets lower, you know, you have less time to work. And so then sometimes we go to a Saturday, but I can't make it to every one of them. You know, I'm busy. I have kids.
Well, it's all volunteer based, right?
Yeah, it's all volunteer based. And so we just kind of juggle who can lead the build day at that time. If somebody's got something that they can't be there. And so, yeah, it just depends on the day and what we're doing.
Well, anytime I go hiking or mountain biking or trail running, I always am amazed and always make the comment, who came all the way up here and brought all this concrete, or who cut all this wood and brought it all the way up here? And it's volunteer programs and organizations like this, a lot of times in conjunction with BLM or the Forest Service or whatever entity. But if those listening ever go on trails and look at like a set of stairs for a hike or a berm for a mountain bike trail, those are volunteers that, like you were talking about earlier, backpacked in or rode up to and carried whatever equipment. I mean, the lucky few have a helicopter drop stuff off, but that's few and far between if that ever happens on some of the trails we build. And so it's just, there's a lot of work that goes into it. One area I lived in, there was a single, an individual is what I'm trying to say, that would take his dirt bike everywhere. And he created a mount on his dirt bike for his chainsaw. And at the end of every spring, he would go and he'd ride all the trails and he'd cut them all out. And people didn't know, and he would take people with him, but people didn't know that the majority of the trails out on that mountain was cut by this single local guy that would bring his friends or his kids or whomever to go cut these out. And people are just clueless that they just, people think that, that they're just stay that way, but they have to be maintained. And so I really like what you're saying too about trying to build the trails in a way that creates minimal maintenance, right? Both for creating new trails or maintaining existing trails. And I like the way you talk about the ride, build, ride, because you get to enjoy what you're loving to do, but put a little work into it as well to expand that. So if somebody wants to get involved, what's the best way to find out more, where you're meeting, when you're meeting? How do people get involved with Iron Trailcraft? So
we have an Instagram page, it's just Iron Trailcraft, and then a Facebook page as well, Iron Trailcraft. And then we have a website. So if you just look up irontrailcraft.org.
Okay.
We have a build schedule on there. We post every week or any other event as well that we need or we want people to know about. And then if you want to be involved, just DM us either on one of those pages. Hey, add me to your email list. And then we email our email list as well. And that's like for group rides that we do or anything that needs to be, brought up that's within the community as far as mountain biking, we email that out. So multiple ways you can get in contact with us. And yeah, we'd love to have anybody that is interested in mountain biking or even anybody that wants to serve on the board. We're always looking for new ideas and for people to bring a fresh perspective or energy or anything like that, right? Like I'm I'm the old man, not the old man, but like there's a lot more guys that have more experience on the board than I am, but I've been with it since we started.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and we've had people come and go and new faces, and we're always looking for anybody that would love to, or that wants to get involved in any way they can.
Yeah.
To either volunteer on a build or volunteer on the board and to share your ideas and to help facilitate us getting new trails built. If you've got any kind of skill set that you feel like would be a benefit to Iron Trailcraft, we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, excuse me. Tell me and the audience here, before we kind of close up, why do you love Iron County and mountain biking in this area? You know, we've got Bryan Head, we've got here in Cedar City, we've got, you know, a lot of different areas, outdoor things. We've got Three Peaks. Well, why should people come check out Cedar City, Iron County for mountain biking? What do we offer here that might be unique or that you just love about?
So much diversity. I mean, honestly, I think that's like what's so special and unique about Iron County is that 30 to 40 minutes in one direction or the other, you can get a completely different environment. So like we're at about 5,500, 6,000 feet right here above sea level. And so we do have some mountain ridings in the foothills.
Just in town.
Yeah, just in town. And then you go up to Blowhard, you know, you're almost at 10,000 feet. You go up to Bryan Head, you can be at 11,000 feet within 40 minutes. And then you've got alpine riding. So I think just the fact that you have so much diverse riding. Three Peaks is more of like desert riding, you know, flat and some slick rock out there. So that's just Iron County alone. And then if you, in the wintertime, it's nice because you can just shoot down to, you know, Washington County, which is 40 minutes away, and you've got all of that riding as well. So just the fact that there's so much different terrain and it's so close, like you don't realize how like lucky we are, and we don't realize how lucky we are that we have all of this right in our backyard and that it's here for everybody to utilize. And again, it's all public land, so everybody can use it. Everybody has access to it. And basically, as long as the trail isn't muddy and wet, you can ride on it. And so there's no like restriction. There's no, and that's the best part about, I feel like, being involved in this is that we were able to participate in something that allowed people to experience this here in town when it wasn't here before. Yeah. And we've had different guys come and go like, oh, I don't like working with the BLM, or they won't let us do this, or they don't know what they're doing. I'm like, guys, you just like, look where we are now. Look where we were before. We had nothing, and now we're here. And you just always have to have that perspective. And so if you're, I mean, even, and I've talked to other groups that are trying to start up in other cities, it's just, you got to start somewhere. Right. And then you just start and you keep working with them and you keep improving and you just keep moving forward and you just do whatever you can to put more trail on the ground. And then, you know, a couple years down the road, you're going to look back and you're like, hey, we got all this new trail we get to ride. Yeah. And then there's always more in front of you and things, obviously there's challenges, there's issues, there's things that come up, but just looking at the overall picture of things, like where we are now is light years ahead of where we were, and we still have a lot more to go. But just that work that we've done over the last number of years, you have so much more trail to ride and so much more experience, and that's going to benefit everybody in Iron County because you have the ability to go use it, run, walk, hike. The businesses are going to benefit. Everybody benefits, and just the overall quality of life that provides for people to get out and be outside right next to your house. You know what I mean? So in Cedar, you can't, I used to get to everywhere like within 5 or 10 minutes. Now it's like 15 or 20, right? With all the cars, with everybody that's moved in, but which is fine. So within like 20 minutes max, you can get to a trailhead and you can run, hike, bike, or walk. And that's still nothing. Yeah. You know what I mean? You go to other towns and, you know, just to get out of town, you're driving 20 minutes, let alone to get to the destination. And it used to be that way here, where you'd have to drive 40 minutes down to Washington County or something to find a good ride. And so I'm really grateful for what Iron Trailcraft is doing. Grateful to have you on the show, and I appreciate your time. And we'll be hitting more trails myself here soon. So yeah, I just want to put a plug in if I can for everybody in our board. I want to thank, because it's all volunteer. And then Dave Jacobson, if he's listening, you're a goat. You know, again, Dave was the one who spearheaded this for the BLM. BLM's been here forever, and we've never had this opportunity until he came in and was hired to basically create recreation on public land. And he did his job very, very well. And all of us in Iron County have him to thank, because he's the one that kind of put this together and spearheaded. Everybody played their integral role, but without him, we wouldn't have what we have now. And just get out and enjoy the trails and appreciate them, take care of them. And that's another thing, when you volunteer and you help build the trail, you realize how much work goes into something like this. And then you have a better appreciation for what we have, and you understand why we don't let motorized dirt bikes on there, why we do the things that we do. When you come out and you build that, and you get a better understanding of why things are done the way they are, and then you have a better appreciation and a better respect for what you're actually enjoying and utilizing.
Cool. Thanks, Mac. I appreciate having you on the show. You guys heard it here from Iron Trailcraft. Get out there and get some riding done. Yeah,
check us out on Instagram and Facebook, and shoot us a DM if you want to get involved.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.